Just give us a few minutes and we'll come in and talk to you. Just go back inside. Can you go back inside, please? Don't, just do as I ask, please. In a few minutes, an officer will come talk to you. Go back inside.
A mother called hospitals, printed flyers, and drove through neighborhoods for 2 days searching for her son, while his body lay hidden in the bushes outside his own apartment building. Dwight Grant, 18, never came home from what he thought was a casual meetup with a classmate on Sunday night. By Tuesday afternoon, police followed a blood trail that led them to his concealed body, stabbed twice and abandoned. 3 of his Miramar high school classmates were arrested within days, but it was the messages on their phones that revealed the horrifying truth. This wasn't a sudden fight. It was a coordinated kill plan discussed in a group chat, and one of them had been assigned to seduce him into a trap. Dwight Grant was 18 years old in October 2021, a senior at Miramar High School in Broward County, Florida. To his family and friends, he was known simply as DJ, a quiet presence in the hallways, someone who kept to himself but remained dependable in ways that mattered. His mother, Molin Emil, a nurse who understood the weight of responsibility, had raised a son who shared that same sense of accountability. DJ didn't disappear without explanation. He didn't miss school without notice. He didn't leave his family wondering where he was. In the days leading up to Sunday, October 17th, DJ's life followed the predictable rhythm of a high school student nearing the end of his teenage years. He attended classes regularly, participated when required, and spent much of his free time gaming, a hobby that kept him connected to friends without the friction of constant social obligations. Those who knew him described a young man who avoided conflict, someone who didn't seek out drama or insert himself into situations that didn't concern him. He had no history of reckless behavior, no pattern of acting out, no reason for anyone to believe he would suddenly vanish. His teachers noticed him, not because he was disruptive, but because he was present in a way that suggested focus. He showed up. He did the work. He didn't make excuses. When classmates were asked about him later, they struggled to recall any moment where DJ had been the source of trouble. He simply wasn't that kind of person. At home, DJ maintained the same level of communication his family had come to expect. He checked in. He let them know where he was going, who he was with, and when he'd be back. It wasn't the behavior of someone sneaking around or hiding something. It was the behavior of someone who understood that people cared about him and who cared enough in return to keep them informed. His mother would later tell investigators that DJ's reliability was one of the things that made his absence so immediately alarming. When he didn't come home that Sunday evening, it wasn't just unusual, it was wrong. Friday, before everything changed, DJ was still living the life of a typical high school senior. There were no visible signs of distress, no indication that he felt threatened or unsafe, no public disputes with classmates, no warnings that something dangerous was approaching. He was simply DJ, the kid who played video games, stayed out of trouble, and kept his family updated. A young man whose routines were so consistent that when they were suddenly broken, everyone who knew him understood that something had gone terribly wrong. By Sunday, October 17th, that predictable life would be interrupted. DJ would leave his home and fail to return, and the people who had come to depend on his reliability would be forced to confront the terrifying reality that the boy they thought they knew, the one who always came home, was gone. Sunday, October 17th began like any other day in the Grant household. Dwight Grant left home that afternoon, and there was no reason for his mother to believe it would be the last time she'd see him alive. He didn't mention any specific plans that raised concern. There were no arguments, no tension, nothing to suggest that the day would end differently than it had countless times before. DJ simply left, and his family expected him to return. But as the evening progressed, that expectation began to shift into something heavier. The hours passed, and DJ didn't come home. His phone went unanswered. Text messages sat unread. Calls went straight to voicemail or rang endlessly without response. For a teenager, silence isn't always unusual. But for DJ, it was a deviation that his family immediately recognized as wrong. Molin Emil tried to remain calm. She reached out to friends, asked neighbors if they'd seen him, checked the places he usually went. Nothing. No one had seen DJ. No one had heard from him. The explanations people offer in these moments, maybe his phone died, maybe he lost track of time, maybe he's with friends and forgot to check in, didn't fit. DJ wasn't the type to forget. He wasn't careless with communication. His absence wasn't just inconvenient, it was alarming. By late Sunday night, the worry had solidified into something closer to fear. Mullen knew her son. She knew his habits, his patterns, his sense of responsibility. And she knew that whatever was keeping him from coming home, it wasn't a choice he was making freely. Something had happened. She just didn't know what. The family began making calls. Friends were contacted again, this time with more urgency. Extended family members were asked if DJ had reached out to them. Anyone who might have seen him, spoken to him, or had any information about where he could be was questioned. The search expanded from the immediate circle of people who knew him well to acquaintances, classmates, anyone who might have crossed paths with him that day. Still, there was nothing. DJ had vanished without explanation, without warning, and without leaving any clear indication of where he had gone or why. The predictable rhythm of his life, the one his family had come to rely on, had been broken, and no one could explain how or why. As Sunday turned into Monday morning, the concern that had started as a quiet worry transformed into full-blown panic. DJ hadn't come home. He hadn't called. He hadn't sent a message. And for a young man who had never given his family reason to fear his absence, the silence was unbearable. By the time Monday arrived, it was clear that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a missed curfew or a forgotten phone charger. Dwight Grant was missing, and the people who loved him were about to discover just how serious that reality was. Monday morning arrived, and with it came a new level of alarm. Dwight Grant did not show up to Miramar High School. For most students, an absence might go unnoticed, a name marked missing on a roster, a seat left empty in a classroom. But for DJ, whose attendance had been consistent and whose presence was reliable, the absence was immediately flagged. Teachers noticed, friends noticed, and the school administration, already aware that his family had been searching for him since Sunday night, understood that this was no longer just a worried mother looking for her son. This was confirmation that something was deeply wrong. DJ's failure to attend school transformed the situation from a family emergency into a broader crisis. His mother had spent the night calling hospitals, checking with friends, driving through neighborhoods, hoping to find him. But when Monday came and DJ didn't walk through the school doors, it became clear that whatever had happened to him wasn't something he could easily return from. He wasn't staying with a friend. He wasn't avoiding home because of an argument. He was gone in a way that defied every pattern his life had followed up until that point. The school became a focal point for the search. Administrators contacted police, urging them to take the disappearance seriously. Classmates were questioned, their phones checked for any recent communication with DJ. Teachers reviewed attendance records, trying to determine if there had been any warning signs in the days leading up to his disappearance. Had he seemed distressed? Had he mentioned any conflicts? Had anyone threatened him? The answers were all the same. No. DJ had been his usual self. Quiet, focused, unremarkable in the best possible way. As the day progressed, the concern spread beyond the school walls. News of DJ's disappearance began circulating through the Miramar community. Parents heard about it from their children. Neighbors discussed it in passing. The local police department, now fully engaged, began organizing a search effort. Flyers were printed with DJ's photo, his age, his physical description, and the date he was last seen. His family distributed them throughout the area, hoping someone had seen something, anything, that could explain where he had gone. But even as the search expanded, there was an underlying awareness that time was working against them. Every hour that passed without contact from DJ made the likelihood of a positive outcome seem more distant. Missing persons cases often hinge on the first 24 to 48 hours. By Monday afternoon, DJ had been missing for nearly a full day, and there were still no leads, no sightings, no evidence of where he might be. His friends gathered after school, exchanging information, trying to piece together his last known movements. Who had seen him last? Where had he been going? Was there anyone new in his life? Anyone who might have drawn him into something unexpected? The answers remained frustratingly unclear. DJ had left home on Sunday, and after that he had seemingly vanished. By Monday evening, the reality had set in. Dwight Grant was not coming home on his own. Whatever had happened to him on Sunday had taken him somewhere he couldn't return from, and the people searching for him were beginning to fear the worst. By Tuesday morning, the search for Dwight Grant had entered its third day. The initial panic had not subsided, but it had sharpened into something more focused. Police were no longer treating this as a case where DJ might simply reappear. They were operating under the assumption that something had prevented him from coming home, and that whatever that something was, it had likely occurred close to where he was last known to be. The geographic focus of the investigation began to tighten. Officers reviewed DJ's known movements on Sunday, trying to establish a timeline that might reveal where he had gone after leaving home. They spoke with neighbors, asking if anyone had seen him walking through the area, getting into a car, or meeting with someone. They checked security camera footage from nearby businesses and apartment complexes, looking for any visual confirmation of his presence. Slowly, the search radius began to contract. What emerged from those early interviews and footage reviews was a pattern that brought investigators back to the same location over and over again. The area surrounding Sherman Circle North, the very neighborhood where DJ lived. It wasn't a large area, just a cluster of apartment buildings, parking lots, and common spaces where residents came and went throughout the day. But it was densely populated, and within its boundaries, there were dozens of places where someone could go unnoticed, especially after dark. Police began canvassing the neighborhood more aggressively on Tuesday. Officers went door to door, asking residents if they had seen or heard anything unusual on Sunday evening. They searched common areas, stairwells, laundry rooms, parking garages, anywhere someone might have been without drawing attention. The assumption was no longer that DJ had wandered far from home. The assumption was that he had been nearby all along, and that the reason no one had found him yet was because he hadn't been in plain sight. DJ's family continued their own search, walking the same streets the police were covering, checking under staircases, behind dumpsters, in alleys and bushes. The desperation was visible. Every corner turned without finding him felt like another step closer to the conclusion no one wanted to reach. But they kept searching because the alternative, accepting that he might never be found, was unthinkable. Around midday on Tuesday, the search took on a new urgency. Officers had narrowed their focus to a specific section of Sherman Circle North, an area directly adjacent to the apartment complex where DJ lived. Reports from residents suggested that something had happened in or near the stairwells of the building over the weekend, though no one had reported it at the time. There were vague mentions of voices raised, footsteps running, the kind of disturbances that might have seemed unremarkable in the moment, but now carried potential significance. By early afternoon, the search had concentrated on the exterior areas surrounding the apartment building. The grassy spaces, the hedges, the small pockets of landscaping that separated one building from another. It was in these spaces, often overlooked by residents passing through, that officers believed they might find the answers they were looking for. And they were right. At approximately 2 p.m. on Tuesday, October 19th, an officer following a trail of bloodstains on the sidewalk made the discovery that would end the search and begin a homicide investigation. Hidden in the bushes beside the apartment building, concealed from immediate view, was the body of Dwight Grant. Tuesday, October 19th, at approximately 2 p.m., the search for Dwight Grant came to a devastating conclusion. Officers canvassing the area near Sherman Circle North in Miramar noticed something that had been overlooked in the initial sweeps of the neighborhood: scattered bloodstains on the sidewalk. They were faint, easily missed by someone walking past without purpose, but to trained eyes conducting a deliberate search, they stood out as significant. The stains formed an irregular pattern suggesting movement, someone bleeding, someone being moved, or both. The officers followed the trail. It led them away from the main walkways, toward the perimeter of the apartment complex where DJ had lived. The path wasn't long, but it was deliberate, guiding them toward an area that residents rarely paid attention to: the landscape bushes and hedges that bordered the building's exterior. These were spaces designed for aesthetic purposes, not functionality. Dense enough to provide cover, but not so isolated that they would draw suspicion under normal circumstances. As the officers approached the bushes, the bloodstains became more concentrated. What had started as sporadic drops on the pavement now appeared more deliberate, as though something or someone had been dragged through the area. The officers moved carefully, aware that they were likely approaching a crime scene. They called for backup and began clearing the foliage, pulling back branches and pushing aside the dense greenery that had kept whatever was hidden there out of public view. That's when they found him. Hidden in the bushes, concealed from the sidewalk and from the view of anyone passing by, was the body of Dwight Grant. He was lying motionless, his clothing darkened with dried blood. There was no question that he had been there for some time, long enough for the community to have searched, for flyers to have been distributed, for his family to have spent 2 agonizing days wondering where he was. And all that time, DJ had been less than 100 feet from his own front door. The officers immediately secured the perimeter. Yellow crime scene tape was stretched across the area, blocking access to the section of sidewalk and landscaping where the body had been found. Residents who had been walking past were redirected, told to stay inside their apartments until further notice. The quiet Tuesday afternoon in a residential neighborhood had transformed into the focal point of a homicide investigation. Detectives arrived shortly after the initial discovery. They documented the scene methodically, photographing the body's position, the surrounding area, the blood trail that had led officers to the location. The body was photographed from multiple angles before being examined. Even from a preliminary assessment, it was clear that DJ had suffered traumatic injuries. The exact cause of death would need to be confirmed through autopsy, but the visible wounds suggested violence, not an accident. Near the body, partially concealed in the same bushes, officers recovered a knife. It was placed into evidence, tagged, and prepared for forensic analysis. The presence of a weapon at the scene, combined with the blood evidence and the location of the body, painted a clear picture. Dwight Grant had been killed, and his body had been hidden deliberately. By mid-afternoon, the news had begun to spread. Family members who had been waiting for updates were informed that a body had been found. They were not yet given confirmation that it was DJ, but the location, the circumstances, and the timeline all pointed to the same unbearable conclusion. The search was over. What remained now was the process of understanding what had happened and who was responsible. The crime scene at Sherman Circle North was processed with the precision required of a homicide investigation. Once Dwight Grant's body had been located and the immediate area secured, detectives began the careful work of documenting every piece of physical evidence that might explain what had happened in the hours between Sunday evening and Tuesday afternoon. The body itself was the primary source of information, and what it revealed confirmed that DJ's death had been violent, deliberate, and fatal within moments of the attack. The initial examination conducted at the scene identified 2 distinct wounds on DJ's body. The first was located on his neck, a deep, penetrating injury consistent with a sharp-edged weapon. The second wound was found on his chest, positioned in a way that suggested it had been delivered with force. Both injuries had caused significant blood loss, and either one could have been fatal on its own. Together, they indicated that DJ had been stabbed at least twice, and that the attack had been carried out with enough intent to ensure he would not survive. The location of the wounds was significant. A neck wound of that nature would have caused rapid bleeding and likely immediate incapacitation. A chest wound, depending on its depth and angle, could have penetrated vital organs or major blood vessels. There was no indication that DJ had been able to defend himself effectively or escape after the initial strikes. The injuries suggested that the attack had been swift, direct, and executed at close range. The body's position in the bushes also provided insight into what had occurred after the attack. DJ had not died where he was found. The blood trail leading from the sidewalk to the concealed location indicated that his body had been moved after death or during the final moments of his life. Someone had dragged or carried him from the site of the attack to the bushes, deliberately hiding him from view. This was not an impulsive act. It was a calculated effort to delay discovery and buy time. In addition to the body, investigators recovered a knife near the scene. It was found hidden in the same bushes where DJ's body had been placed, close enough to suggest it had been discarded immediately after the attack. The knife was consistent with the type of weapon that could have caused the injuries observed on DJ's body. It was bagged, tagged, and sent for forensic analysis to determine if it bore fingerprints, DNA, or other trace evidence that might link it to a suspect. The recovery of the weapon was critical. In many homicide investigations, the murder weapon is never found, discarded in water, buried, or destroyed. But in this case, the knife had been left at the scene, likely because the individuals responsible had prioritized concealing the body over disposing of the weapon more thoroughly. That decision would prove costly. Blood evidence was also collected from the sidewalk, from the bushes, and from the immediate area surrounding the body. The pattern and distribution of the blood suggested that the attack had occurred near the stairwell of the apartment complex, and that DJ had either been moved immediately or had attempted to move himself before collapsing. The evidence painted a clear sequence: attack, injury, movement, concealment. By the time the body was removed from the scene and transported for autopsy, investigators had established the basics of what had happened. Dwight Grant had been stabbed twice, fatally, in a location close to his home. His body had been hidden deliberately, and a weapon had been recovered. What remained unknown was who had done this, why, and whether they had acted alone. Those answers would come not from the body, but from the digital evidence and witness accounts that were about to surface. With the body recovered and the physical evidence documented, investigators shifted their focus to reconstructing Dwight Grant's final movements. The question was no longer where DJ was, but how he had ended up in those bushes, who had put him there, and what had led him to that specific location on Sunday evening. The answers would emerge through a combination of digital evidence, witness statements, and security footage that painted a disturbing picture of calculated deception and violence. The first major breakthrough came from tips provided by members of the community. A woman had walked into the Miramar Police Department on Wednesday, the day after DJ's body was discovered, carrying her teenage niece's phone. On that phone was a group chat involving students from Miramar High School. The messages within that chat contained references to violence, to a planned confrontation, and to DJ himself. The content was alarming enough that investigators immediately seized the phone and began tracing the individuals involved in the conversation. The group chat identified three names: 17-year-old Andre Dexter Clemens, 16-year-old Jacine Smith, and 17-year-old Christy Parishan. All three were students at Miramar High School. All three had been in contact with each other on the day DJ disappeared. And all three, according to the messages, had been involved in what had happened to him. Investigators moved quickly. Within hours, they had obtained search warrants for the phones of all three suspects. What they found corroborated the witness tip and added crucial details to the timeline. Messages between the three teens indicated that the attack on DJ had been planned in advance, discussed openly, and executed with specific roles assigned to each participant. From those messages and subsequent interviews, a clearer sequence of events began to emerge. On Sunday evening, Christy Parishan had made contact with DJ. The nature of that contact was described in later statements as a lure, a deliberate effort to bring DJ to a specific location under false pretenses. DJ, unaware that he was walking into a trap, had agreed to meet her. The location she directed him to was a stairwell inside the apartment complex where he lived, a semi-enclosed space that offered privacy and limited visibility from the street. DJ entered the stairwell believing he was meeting Christy alone. But he wasn't alone. Andre Clemens and Jacine Smith were already positioned inside the stairwell, waiting. According to statements given later by Jacine Smith, Andre had instructed both her and Christy on what to wear: all black clothing, gloves, head coverings, and had outlined the plan in detail before they left Jacine's apartment. The attack was not spontaneous. It was coordinated. When DJ arrived, the confrontation escalated quickly. Jacine later admitted that she had been told to prevent DJ from leaving, to block his exit and keep him contained within the stairwell. Christy, having fulfilled her role in bringing DJ to the location, moved out of the way as Andre approached. DJ attempted to flee, but Jacine and Andre physically restrained him, forcing him to the ground. It was in that stairwell, pinned down and unable to escape, that DJ was stabbed. The wounds to his neck and chest were inflicted while Jacine held his legs, and Andre wielded the weapon. According to Jacine's own account, DJ begged for his life as the attack unfolded. He knew he was dying. He asked them to stop. They did not. After DJ stopped moving, the three teens faced the immediate problem of concealment. They could not leave his body in the stairwell. It would be discovered too quickly. So they dragged him out of the building, down the walkway, and into the bushes where officers would later find him. The blood trail that led police to the body was the result of that movement, a physical record of the path they took to hide what they had done. Security camera footage from the apartment complex later confirmed key elements of this sequence. Cameras captured the three teens, dressed in black, approaching the stairwell area on Sunday evening. Another camera captured them dragging something, later identified as DJ's body, toward the bushes. The footage did not show the attack itself, but it documented the before and after, providing visual evidence that corroborated the timeline pieced together from witness statements and phone records. By the time investigators had reviewed all the evidence, the sequence was clear. Dwight Grant had been lured to a stairwell, ambushed, stabbed, and then concealed in the bushes where his body remained hidden for 2 days. The attack was not random. It was planned, coordinated, and executed by three individuals who believed they could hide what they had done. Once investigators had identified the three suspects and begun piecing together witness accounts, they turned to the evidence that would either confirm or contradict the stories being told: security camera footage and the contents of the seized phones. In modern investigations, digital evidence often serves as the most reliable witness, immune to memory lapses, free from bias, and capable of capturing events exactly as they occurred. In the case of Dwight Grant's murder, that digital record became the foundation upon which the entire case was built. The apartment complex where DJ lived, like many residential buildings in Miramar, was equipped with multiple security cameras positioned at entry points, parking areas, and common spaces. These cameras operated continuously, recording footage that was stored for review in the event of incidents or complaints. On the night DJ was killed, those cameras were running, and they captured critical moments that investigators would later use to verify the timeline and identify the individuals involved. The first piece of footage showed three figures dressed entirely in black approaching the area near the stairwell on Sunday evening. The clothing matched the descriptions later provided by Justine Smith during her interview with police: black tops, black pants, gloves, head coverings. The figures moved deliberately, avoiding well-lit areas and keeping close to the building's exterior walls. Their behavior was not that of residents casually walking through their neighborhood. It was calculated, cautious, and consistent with individuals attempting to avoid detection. A second camera, positioned near the stairwell entrance, captured one of the figures, later identified as Christy Parisian, lingering near the doorway while the other two moved upstairs. This footage aligned with Justine's statement that Christy had remained at the bottom of the stairwell to make a phone call and signal when DJ arrived. The timing of the footage confirmed that the teens had been in position before DJ entered the building, supporting the conclusion that the encounter was premeditated rather than spontaneous. The most damning footage came from a camera that had a partial view of the area outside the stairwell. While the camera did not capture the attack itself, it recorded what happened immediately afterward. The footage showed the three figures emerging from the stairwell, dragging something heavy between them. The object being dragged was consistent in size and shape with a human body. The figures moved quickly, pulling the object away from the stairwell and toward the bushes at the edge of the property. The timestamp on the footage placed this movement within the time frame of DJ's disappearance, and the blood trail discovered 2 days later followed the exact path shown in the video. The footage did not stop there. Additional cameras captured the three teens leaving the apartment complex after the body had been concealed. They walked in the direction of Justine Smith's residence, carrying bags that had not been visible when they first arrived. The contents of those bags would later become a focal point of the investigation. While the security footage provided visual confirmation of the suspects' movements, the data extracted from their phones offered insight into their planning and coordination. Messages exchanged between Andre Clemens, Justine Smith, and Christy Parisian in the days leading up to the murder revealed discussions about a planned confrontation with DJ. The messages referenced a conflict involving a girl, backup for a fight, and specific instructions about clothing and timing. These were not vague threats or idle talk. They were operational details being shared among co-conspirators. One message in particular contradicted Yassine's later claim that she believed the plan was only for a fight. The message, sent before Sunday evening, referenced killing and included language that suggested all three participants understood the potential lethality of what they were planning. That single message undermined Yassine's defense that she had been misled or coerced and it provided prosecutors with evidence of intent. The phones also contained location data that placed all three suspects in the area of Sherman Circle North at the time of the attack. GPS coordinates, cell tower pings, and app usage logs all confirmed that the teens had been where witnesses and security footage said they were. There was no ambiguity, no room for alternative explanations. The digital record corroborated every key element of the physical evidence. After the murder, the phones captured another critical sequence of events. Messages sent in the hours following DJ's death showed the suspects discussing what they had done, attempting to coordinate their stories, and expressing concern about being caught. There was no remorse in those messages, only fear of consequences and calculations about how to avoid them. The final piece of digital evidence came from footage recorded near Jacine Smith's apartment complex. Cameras there captured the three teens in an open grassy area, standing around a fire. Witnesses later reported seeing them burning clothing and other items using gasoline. One resident described the scene in detail during a police interview, noting the body language of the individuals involved, tense, anxious, but also deliberate in their actions. The fire was not an impulsive act. It was an attempt to destroy evidence, to eliminate the clothing they had worn during the attack and any other materials that might link them to the crime. A security guard who observed the fire reported it to police, though he did not immediately understand its significance. By the time investigators connected the fire to the murder, the clothing had been destroyed. But the fact that the fire had occurred and that it had been witnessed and recorded provided further confirmation that the suspects had taken active steps to conceal their involvement. When all the evidence was compiled, security footage, phone records, GPS data, witness statements, and the physical evidence from the crime scene, the result was a timeline that left no gaps. Every movement, every decision, every action taken by the suspects had been documented, either digitally or physically. The case against Andre Clemens, Jacine Smith, and Christy Parisian was not built on assumptions or circumstantial inferences. It was built on an unbroken chain of evidence that placed them at the scene, confirmed their roles, and established their intent. With the evidence compiled and the timeline established, investigators moved swiftly to bring the three suspects into custody. Within days of Dwight Grant's body being discovered, all three individuals identified in the group chat and security footage were located and arrested. Christy Parisian was taken into custody first, followed by Jacine Smith, who was found outside her family's apartment around 11 p.m. on the night of her arrest. Andre Clemens, identified as the individual who had wielded the weapon during the attack, was apprehended shortly thereafter. The arrest marked the beginning of a legal process that would ultimately hold all three accountable for their roles in DJ's death. The decision to charge all three suspects as adults was made quickly. Despite their ages, meaning Jacine Smith was 16, Christy Parisian and Andre Clemens were both 17, the nature of the crime, the level of planning involved, and the deliberate efforts to conceal evidence led prosecutors to pursue adult charges. Under Florida law, juveniles can be charged as adults in cases involving serious violent felonies, and the circumstances of DJ's murder met that threshold. All three suspects were charged with tampering with evidence, a charge that reflected their attempts to destroy clothing and conceal the body after the attack. All three were also charged with conspiracy to commit murder, acknowledging that the crime had been planned and coordinated among multiple individuals. The evidence of premeditation, the group chat messages, the coordinated clothing, the luring of DJ to a specific location, supported the conspiracy charge and eliminated any possibility that the murder had been a spontaneous act. Jacine Smith and Christy Parisian were each charged with second-degree murder. While they had not been the ones to deliver the fatal blows, their active participation in the attack, Jacine's physical restraint of DJ and Christy's role in luring him to the location, made them legally culpable for his death. Under Florida law, individuals who participate in a felony that results in death can be charged with murder even if they did not personally inflict the fatal injuries. Andre Clemens faced the most serious charge, first-degree premeditated murder. As the individual who had planned the attack, recruited the others, and delivered the stab wounds that killed DJ, Andre was considered the primary actor in the crime. First-degree murder in Florida carries the possibility of life imprisonment, And in cases involving juveniles charged as adults, the sentence can include decades behind bars with limited opportunity for early release. The legal process moved through the court system over the following months. All three suspects remained in custody throughout the proceedings, held without bond due to the severity of the charges and the risk they posed to public safety. Their families hired defense attorneys, but the strength of the evidence, security footage, phone records, witness statements, and the physical evidence recovered from the crime scene left little room for alternative narratives. Faced with the overwhelming documentation of their involvement, both Jacine Smith and Christy Parisian eventually entered guilty pleas. By pleading guilty, they avoided the uncertainty of a trial and the possibility of even harsher sentences if convicted by a jury. In exchange for their pleas, prosecutors recommended sentences that reflected their cooperation and their secondary roles in the attack, though the sentences were still substantial. Jacine Smith was sentenced to 25 years in prison, followed by 10 years of probation. Christy Parisian received the same sentence, 25 years in prison, followed by 10 years of probation. Both would serve the majority of their adult lives behind bars, their futures irrevocably altered by the decisions they made on Sunday, October 17th. Andre Clemens initially maintained his innocence, but as the case progressed and the evidence against him became undeniable, he too entered a guilty plea. On February 18, 2025, now 20 years old, Andre stood before a judge and admitted his role in the premeditated murder of Dwight Grant. The plea came more than 4 years after DJ's death, a delay that reflected the complexity of the case and the legal processes involved in charging a juvenile as an adult for first-degree murder. The judge sentenced Andre Clemens to 40 years in prison, followed by lifetime probation. The sentence ensured that Andre would remain incarcerated well into his 50s, and that even after his release, he would remain under supervision for the rest of his life. The severity of the sentence reflected the calculated nature of the crime, the brutality of the attack, and the fact that Andre had been the driving force behind the decision to kill DJ. The legal proceedings concluded with formal accountability for all three individuals involved. The charges, the guilty pleas, and the sentences provided a measure of closure for Dwight Grant's family, though no legal outcome could restore what had been taken from them. DJ's mother, Molin Emile, attended the sentencing hearings, bearing witness to the consequences faced by the individuals who had killed her son. In victim impact statements, family members described DJ as a caring, loyal, and honest person, a young man who had been taken from them in an act of senseless violence. The case against Andre Clemens, Jacine Smith, and Christy Parisian served as a formal accounting for the death of Dwight Grant. The investigation had moved from a missing persons case to a homicide, from the discovery of a body to the identification of suspects, and finally to convictions and sentencing. The legal system had processed the evidence, assigned responsibility, and imposed consequences. What remained was the memory of an 18-year-old who had been killed steps from his own home, and the recognition that 3 lives had been permanently altered by choices made over the course of a single evening. Dwight Grant was 18 years old when his life ended in a stairwell just steps from his own home. He was a son, a student, and someone whose absence was noticed immediately because he had always been reliable. His story is a reminder that violence doesn't always announce itself. It can happen quietly, deliberately, and close to home. If this case affected you, take a moment to remember DJ, not for how he died, but for who he was. A young man who stayed out of trouble, who kept in touch with his family, who played video games and showed up to class. His life mattered before it was taken, and it continues to matter now. If you found this valuable, please consider subscribing. This channel focuses on presenting true crime cases with accuracy, respect, and attention to the facts that often get lost in sensationalized retellings. No dramatization, no speculation, just the documented truth. Leave a comment below if there's a case you'd like covered in this format, or if you have thoughts on how communities can better recognize warning signs before violence occurs. Share this video with anyone studying criminal justice, journalism, or victim advocacy. These stories deserve to be told carefully. And finally, if you or someone you know is involved in a situation where violence seems inevitable, reach out. Speak to a trusted adult, a counselor, or law enforcement. One conversation can change the outcome.